All right. Hello, hello. Happy Sunday evening. Hope everyone has had a good Sunday. I hope you were able to rest, refresh, worship, all of the things that you would use your Sunday to do. I know for some people, your Sabbath, your time where you rest and worship, are Saturday, and for many, or most of you, that will be Sunday. So, hope everybody's had a good one. I came on really briefly earlier to give you guys the link to the Spiritual Pathways test. I have had planned to do this live for our Just Show Up live to cover spiritual pathways. I've actually mentioned it to a couple of people over the past couple of weeks that I've been wanting to do a live where we talk about spiritual pathways, what they are, um, what yours are, and I will share what mine are, or at least one or two of mine, because I have several, a few that are more dominant than others. But yeah, so I'm finally here doing this one, and I hope not to be before you long, because it's Sunday, and if we get it right on Sunday, there is more hope that we will get it right throughout the rest of the week. And when I say get it right, I'm referring to getting rest, prepping for the week, and having a good week. All right, and so let me pull mine up right quick. In that window, and then in the next one, the test itself. All right, so let's officially start. Welcome again for those of you who logged on right at 8 o'clock. Thank you for your patience as we waited for a couple folk to get a chance to come on and for me to pull up my links. I have them all pulled up now. If this is your first time viewing my channel, welcome. My name is Danetta, and I do several things on this channel. And I actually want to tell you about the Creative Scholar channel, which is a new channel. I will post the link to that in the description of this live when this live is over. My intention was to go live on this page and my Creative Scholar page at once with this particular topic, because I think this is a very important topic for those who watch my content for creative scholar things, psychology, theology, creativity. But it's a new channel, and I discovered that I needed to allow it to be approved for me to go live on that channel. I actually tried to go live on that channel the other day, and I think it was 24 to 48 hours, and then I should be able to go live on that channel. So in the future, some of these topics I will cover exclusively on the Creative Scholar page. But for now, we are still over here on the A Dose of Danetta page, and this is Just Show Up. So for those of you who have been tuned in watching for years while I've been on this particular page, there is a thing where on Saturdays or Sundays, normally I would go live for a few minutes just so that I could check in with y'all at least once a week. And then during the podcast season, my once a week live was sharing the podcast. But podcast is on break, and so I'm happy to be able to come to you guys with Just Show Up Live. Let me know in the chat where you're coming in from. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know what you did today. Did you rest? Did you worship? Are you someone who does something within your church community or ministry? Did you do ministry things today? Sometimes, for some people, Sunday is clearly a rest day, but then for a lot of others, Sunday it's a work day. It's a ministry day. And one of the things that I think is really important, even for people who Sunday is a work day, even though it's a day of worship for you, to make sure that you take a day or at least some hours in a day during the week and rest, or have some boundaries. Put your phones on do not disturb, or turn them off, and just make sure those who, look out for you know how to reach you in the case of an emergency, and just go and do the things that you need to do for your mental, spiritual, and emotional health. And so, along those lines, today we'll jump ahead on into the topic. So, the topic for today is spiritual pathways. And I want to talk about that by first defining what is a spiritual pathway. And if you went to the link earlier, I left a link in the other YouTube video that I did earlier, just letting you guys know to take the test. But if you didn't, that's fine. I'll put the link in the description of this video when it's over. So the resource that I'm using today is from a church called Woodstock City Church, and they have the Spiritual Pathways test on their website. I don't know anything about Woodstock City Church, so I'm not promoting or unpromoting, dispromoting, whichever is the word, their church either. They just happen to have a Spiritual Pathways test on their website that I liked. So over the past, it's 2024, 9 or 10 years or so, I've seen several different versions of this test. And basically, it's a chance for you to sit with and think about what are the best ways that you connect with God, right? So let's look at that. So a spiritual pathway is basically your most natural way to connect with God. So your spiritual pathway is your most natural way to connect with God. So that might sound a little simplified, like, well, why give it a special name like a spiritual pathway? Because believe it or not, everyone connects with God most authentically in different ways. One of the ways that we see that played out is through different denominations. And a lot of times with denomination, it's doctrinal. It's, what do we believe that the Bible is saying? What do we believe what do we believe is the truth about God and how we are to interact with God as human beings? But even within denominations, you can go to 5 different churches in the same denomination. Each of them will have a different flavor, or each of them will have a different feel, depending on different elements. So some of the ways we see people's most dominant or most natural way of connecting with God, we see that through different genres of church, different styles of church or worship service. But spiritual pathway is really a unique thing, and it is really individualized. And although we can learn from each other's spiritual pathway or most unique way of connecting with God, there is something very personal about it that does influence the way we spend time with God. And in some cases, it may influence the way we worship within a community. Sometimes if you go to a particular church, or you go to a particular like worship event, you kind of know, especially if you're aware of the people or the group that you're going with, you kind of feel a flow when there are a dominant number of people who connect with God naturally the same way. One of the things that I think is a blessing that I did not really realize was kind of unique about myself, it was actually pointed out to me during my CIU days by one of my mentor professors. One thing that I think is unique about me is that I really respect all of the different ways. And, I was raised in one particular flavor or style that wasn't necessarily even mine. But I could get with it. I could enjoy a worship service where people had a different flavor or a different style of worship um, than me. And then as I became an adult and went to college and then on to work professional jobs in different cities, I've been and I mentioned this in one of my videos earlier this year, really at the top of the year. I've literally in my lifetime, been a member of a holiness church, an AME church, um, a couple of non-denominational churches. Um, One of my absolute favorite churches that I was ever a member of is Assemblies of God. And I think one of the things that made all of those experiences unique for me and ones that I could appreciate is that I didn't come to any of those with any preconceived notions or pretense. So, in other words, I didn't really know much about the Assemblies of God denomination when I started to attend an Assemblies of God church. I didn't even know the church was Assemblies of God. I didn't know what that was. I just knew I just felt such peace, and I was in such a place of just needing healing and care from God. And it was just right up my alley. I just enjoy the worship. A lot of the songs that I learned on the worship team at that church, I still love to this day. One of them is one that I listen to every morning. It's like a part of my morning ritual. So it helps me to connect with God, right? And so I knew nothing about Assemblies of God. It was just a really good church. And I learned later on that this church was a part of Assemblies of God, but it was kind of a very unique type of style compared to other surrounding Assemblies of God, right? So all of that to say, throughout my life, I have had the chance to get to know very well and spend a lot of time within a particular worship setting and within a particular uh, faith community, multiple ones, and they were all very, very different. But there was something about each one of them that I was able to really grab hold to foundational things that are still present in my relationship with God. And so I guess in a way, I realize now that one of the reasons I've always been able to appreciate just different styles of worship and different ways to engage with God is because from the inception, from childhood, I never really felt like I fit in different environments. And a part of that was because there's just always something in me that I wanted to experience God and understand and know God my way. And my way meaning not my way against the Bible's way, but my way meaning you're not going to make me worship God the way you worship God. Like, if you like to sing and cry, I can appreciate that. I can be moved that you are moved in the presence of God. But if I'm singing and crying, it's because I genuinely feel an open heart towards God and not because you're doing it. Like, that's just kind of always been a thing for me. No matter what kind of church I've gone to, I have appreciated being able to be in environments where I can be myself and get to know God. And through that, and through just different attending all of these different types of church over the past 20 or so years, I have been able to grow in my different modalities of being able to connect with God. So, and I'm thankful for that experience now because I believe that it is something that lends itself to me being able to walk with other people in their spiritual formation without putting them in the box of what I do. I think, just not fitting in a lot of spaces and at the same time being very staunch that like I'm going to figure this out and be myself has helped me to be able to appreciate all of those environments. I can go into pretty much any true church environment where people are genuinely worshiping the God of the Bible, which is the God that I serve and believe in and have committed my life to. I can go into pretty much any environment and appreciate it and be able to worship. Like any environment pretty much, as long as it is really the true and living God. You know, I've also walked into atmospheres and been like, oh, something something's a little off here, and it wasn't based upon, you know, it was too loud or it was too quiet. I was able to discern certain things. And I didn't understand that at the time. You know, I think back like in my early 20s, you know, being in college and visiting different churches or going to sing at different places. And there were times when I walked into environments and something was just not right. And I didn't quite know what that something was. I understand that a little bit more now. But at the same time, you know, also in my 20s and 30s, I remember, you know, attending and singing at an AME church and leaving that same AME church service in the morning, and then in that evening going to just attend a program at a Church of God in Christ. Like it was fine. It was cool. And I know that everybody's not that way, and that's okay. And I think that's one of the main points and one of the main appreciations that I had when I first discovered spiritual pathways, because it basically gave a language to all of the different ways that people naturally connect with God, right? One of the things that I say when I am speaking about this topic is that God did not, he made us in his image, but even in making us in his image, he did not design like cookie cutter clones of all kinds. There are people who know and love and worship the living God that we see speaking in Genesis 1:1, or that we read about in Genesis 1:1, from all over this world, and different languages. And you know, some of them you could play like very familiar music that is associated with Christianity here in the States, and they may not register the words, it may not be their style, but they could still sense and worship the living God. I remember not even too long ago, like a really quick, like fleeting vision that I had. I remember sharing on the podcast that is one of the ways that God speaks to me. Sometimes it's because I have prayed and he's given me an answer, but at other times God is just speaking to me about something that he wants me to pay attention to. And I remember a quick fleeting vision that I had was of me being in, just like really quick fleeting vision. It was of me being like in a worship service, towards like the back of the worship service. And but it was in Hebrew. Like people were, I didn't recognize the words that were being sung, but I recognized, interestingly, I recognized that it was in Hebrew because I remember some of the words of a song that I learned in undergrad when I was at South Carolina State University. I remember one of the concert choir songs that we learned was in Hebrew. All of the words were in Hebrew. And so when I had this fleeting vision, I recognized what I was hearing because some of the words were the same as the words in the song that I had learned. And so anyway, I was in this fleeting vision. I was in the back of a worship service, and I was with what seemed like people that I knew and I was familiar with, even though I couldn't tell you who the people were in my waking life. But they were singing in Hebrew. I didn't know what they were saying, but I just knew that I was in the presence of God. I knew that I was able to worship along with them. And that was really not too long ago. That was maybe like, I could probably look in one of my like journals and see when that was, but it was probably a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, that was another reminder to me of why I wanted to cover spiritual pathways. So, like I said, spiritual pathways are basically what is the most natural way that you connect with God? What is the most natural way that you connect with God? If you go back to my last post, you will see the link to the spiritual pathways test. I encourage you to take it. I will also put that link in this description. So let's talk about some of the spiritual pathways as they are defined through this particular test, but the ones that are listed here are the basic ones. So I'm just going to go down the list of all of them that are defined here, and then I'll share with you mine. And then I'd love to see in the chat any of you who've taken the test, or any of you who just, you already know about spiritual pathways and you know what yours is. I'd love to see that in the chat as well. All right, so for some people are naturalists, right? And a naturalist is a person that draws near to God through nature. If being in nature just really helps you to, it just brings the presence of God for you and helps you to focus on God and connect with God, you may be a naturalist if that is one of your most dominant ways to really feel like you're connecting with God. Another is sensate. All right, a sensate, a person who considers themselves sensate, is someone who draws near to God, through their senses. All right. If you draw near to God through your senses, you might be a sensate. So you'll notice, if any of you who've traveled internationally, or even if you've traveled, nationally, depending on where you go, you will notice in some places of worship, just the building, the cathedrals, sometimes the paintings, sometimes the candles that may be lit, or the scents. Even if you just go back and read in the Old Testament, a lot of the way that God's chosen people worshiped, they engaged the five senses. Now, yes, that can cross over the line from the holy and the profane, depending on what it is that you are doing and why you're doing it and what you're focused on. But there are some people, even in today's time, maybe less in the in Western countries than in Eastern, but there are people who just a particular kind of like smells and scents and sounds and sights help them to draw near to God, help them to focus on God and commune with God. So you may be a sensate. And I don't know as many people, I don't think, that are sensates as far as their preference for connecting with God. But if you are one, there is a good chance that maybe you feel out of place. No matter where you go to worship, if you find worship services or places of worship in your region, you may not find necessarily a lot of places that, especially if you consider yourself an Orthodox Christian, you might not find a lot of places that focus on the five senses in a group worship service. And so being different, sometimes you might not know that, like, you might be different, but there's nothing abnormal about that being your natural way of connecting with God. And that's one of the main reasons I keep saying that, why I believe I have been like prompted multiple times to do the message on this, share this about pathways, is because you might be a sensate that God is calling, that God is drawing to himself. And you don't know that you need to just create an environment in your home where you can talk to God, where you can experience God, where you can be focused on God by engaging your five senses. All right, let's move on. The next one is ascetic. An ascetic is a person that draws near to God through solitude and simplicity. Some people draw near to God through solitude and simplicity. An ascetic person might not want all of the different things. Like for me, and we'll get to one of mine, which is contemplative. Or one of mine is contemplative and another one is intellectual. Like, I need books and journals and all of those things, because even when it's my quiet time with God, I want to be able to write things down. I want to be able to, if the spirit brings a verse to my mind, I want to be able to grab my Bible and find it. Or, if a connection is being made, I want to be able to, I want my books and my things around me when I am spending time with God. So a person who is ascetic, that might just be a complete distraction to them. They might just be like, just move all that stuff, just move that out of my space. And completely okay. That's the way you connect best with God. You need simplicity and you need solitude. All right. And so I love how one of the things that I think is important to know too is that you might have a dominant pathway, but there might be different ones that you need to engage in different times in your life. You may be in a time in your life where you need more solitude, or you may be in a time in your life where you can't have a lot of time to yourself. And so it's good to know that those few minutes or that hour or whatever time, even if it's just your drive from one place to the next, or you getting up early and you're spending time, you taking 30 minutes in the bathroom, it's good to know that the way you naturally connect with God is through simplicity and solitude. So you can be intentional to do that. You may have to make choices sometimes between other things that may be happening that do not necessarily help you personally to engage with God. It's just good to know, because then you can be intentional about trying to accommodate your best way of connecting with God as best you can, at least once a day. Move on. The next one, activists. Activists draw near to God through bringing about social change. Some people, the way they feel closest to God is when they are able to put into action God's justice, when they're able to, show mercy, when they're able to show up and make sure that people are taken care of. Believe it or not, that is a person's natural way of connecting with God. Maybe we all should do all of them sometimes, and there are some that we do whether it's our natural way of being or not. But it's good to know that if being an activist is your more prominent pathway, because then maybe for an activist person, they may not get it when everyone does not lean that way. And so sometimes being aware of all of them and knowing yours also helps you to allow other people to connect with God in their best way. And it also helps us all to be open to all of them so that we can appreciate that in other people, but also so that we can recognize, other things that we are doing or other ways of being that are pathways to connecting with God. All right, the next one is caregiver. Caregivers draw near to God through caring for and serving others. Being a caregiver is a spiritual pathway. So, caregivers, those of you who that's how God draws your heart closer to Him, know that it is completely okay for that to be one of your dominant ways of connecting with God. All right. For some people, caregiving is more of a joy than a burden. For some people, they're not going to be able to focus per se. I won't say they're not be able to, but it is not natural for them to spend more time in solitude. They're more so going to want to spend their time engaging with people and doing different things that serve people. That's one of the ways that they connect with God. All right, that's one we all can appreciate, one we all can be intentional to engage in. But at the same time, we cannot judge one another when someone else is more apt to a particular direction than the other. All right, the next one is enthusiast. Enthusiasts draw near to God through celebration and mystery. All right, and so that's where you will see, people that like you not gonna come together and worship God without a dance. You're not gonna come together and worship God without jubilation, without loud song. Someone else might want, you know, a candle in a quiet space and they just want to meditate, and they are getting downloads from heaven like you wouldn't believe. Whereas the person that, maybe they walk down the grocery store aisle with loves the Lord just as much as them, but they don't understand you sitting over there being quiet with a few tears rolling down your face. They don't understand that. They don't understand like why you're not screaming and shouting and jumping. They don't quite get it. But believe it or not, it is because we are not clones. God didn't make us cookie cutter. Everyone connects with God more naturally in different ways. It doesn't mean we can't all be intentional to engage all of the ways and to learn from all of the ways and be blessed by all of the ways, or even be open to the fact that certain ones are going to be more dominant during different times in our lives. But it does mean that God made all of us different. All of us are needed, And we all can find our place in the kingdom of God and just in our own lives to make room for time with God. All right. And then the last two, which are actually my two dominant ones, and maybe this is listed. Yeah, the last two. Contemplative. A contemplative draws near to God through personal adoration and heartfelt devotion. All right, through personal adoration and heartfelt devotion. A contemplative person, you may not necessarily always know that there's a whole lot stirring within them. But it's there, and it is working itself out in different ways. It is showing itself in different ways. And then the last one is intellectual. Intellectuals draw near to God through their minds. So whether that's learning something, whether that is reading and understanding something, whether that is through God speaking something or showing something in the eye of the mind in order to bring some kind of clarity or spark some kind of action. It's just one of the natural ways that people connect with God, right? So that is spiritual pathways, y'all. I would love to know, if you take the test, what are maybe list your your three top ways of drawing near to God, your three top pathways of drawing near to God. My three top are intellectual, contemplative, and enthusiast. And, some of that I believe is naturally within, and then some of it is really, it's nature and nurture for me. I grew up maybe with both, with enthusiasts and those who were contemplative, and then just, I want to say, my natural bent. Now, I would probably, maybe when I was younger, enthusiast would have been my top. But, through different things in life and just becoming an adult, enthusiast is important to me, but it is not my top. It's one of my three. So mine are intellectual, contemplative, and enthusiast. Interestingly, the older I get, the more I feel I'm a bit of a naturalist. And I think, a lot of that has to do with just probably just my makeup, because I am a little bit more introverted, but at the same time extroverted in communication for things like this. Getting outside of the four walls helps me to connect with God, because it takes me out of my overthinking, or out of, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, or out of trying to figure out, okay, should I do this? It takes me out of that, and I see like this big world that God made that is still spinning on its axis, regardless of whether or not I know what is the next step. God is on the throne. And so, and even as it says in the Psalms, that the heavens are telling the goodness of God. There's something about being outside, or looking out the window, or seeing the weather, or sitting by water, that just helps me connect with God. And although that wasn't listed as one of my top, it is becoming one that is more of a way for me, because it helps me to be more grounded. It helps me to what's the word I'm looking for, to regulate. It helps me regulate my nervous system, being outside. So, it might be days, and I posted a video about that a couple of months ago. If you're someone who works from home, or even if you're someone who just sits at a desk all day, to be intentional, to take advantage of opportunities where you can be outside in nature, especially during the warmer months. If you happen to live in the low country, or you live by water, and, whenever we can get away from the gnats and the mosquitoes, be outside, working out, walking, prayer walks. Whatever way helps us to bring our minds and our bodies together to focus on God and allow the presence of God to do the work that He does in our lives, whatever it takes. I think one of the other major benefits is of knowing our own personal spiritual pathways, no matter what, whatever style of worship community you're a part of. It doesn't necessarily define you. When you are secure, and you are you're consistent, and you're in a good way in your relationship with God, you can so much more enjoy and appreciate when people are different. Like instead of feeling I guess unappreciated or unseen or overlooked or any of those things, like the more we tap into our own individual relationships with God, the more effective we are with the people that we minister to, the more effective we are with the people that we encounter, because there's less comparison. There's less of like, oh, this person must have it all together and that's why they're this, that, and the third. It's more of like, wow, thank you, God, for the opportunity to meet so and so. Thank you, Lord, for such and such gift and how they enjoy you and how they encounter you and how they engage you and how they encourage people. It's so much less comparison and so much less insecurity when we are able to have what I call radical acceptance. That term is used, people mean different things by it, but on the foundational level, radical acceptance is what it is. It means that you're able to accept a situation, or you're able to accept yourself and other people in the exact state that they're in. Knowing that doesn't mean that they're going to stay there, or that doesn't mean that people don't go from glory to glory, but we don't have to live in denial, or we don't have to try to be somebody else, or we don't have to feel shame or feel like we don't belong in any space, because God made us uniquely. He made us wonderfully. We are the apple of his eye. And if he wanted every single person to look alike, act alike, think alike, talk alike, connect with him alike, he would have done it like that. He would have done it where the moment you give your life to Christ, this is how your psyche is modeled. Now there are parts of us, of our growth and our healing, that make us more it just makes us better able to connect with God, because he's helping us to work through all of the blockages within our souls. And interestingly, the book that we're reading in the book club, The Release of the Spirit, it talks about that, how God allows life circumstances and God allows the things that we experience to break that, to break the way we are, the way we have become because of living in a fallen world, the way we have become because of trauma, disappointments, pride, having our own thoughts about how he should do things, and our misgivings, our misunderstandings, all of the things about us that are broken. God can make us whole when we are willing to submit to him. And I think there's so much beauty in knowing that a part of submitting to God is accepting who he made us to be. A part of submitting to God is accepting who he made you to be, who he called you to be. A part of submitting to God is accepting who he called other people to be, who he made other people to be. Being able to see God in something, in someone, and know that although it doesn't look exactly the same, in you, that is the same God. That although someone else may need to shout and dance, and then someone else may need to be able to understand deep things of the Lord, that doesn't make either one of those people superior to the other. It makes both of them, figuratively speaking, surrendered to God, to the living God, and willing to open our hearts and our minds to God. And so that's all I have tonight. I wanted you all to go over this with me. I know some people already know theirs. Let me check the comments. I see. All right, Mrs. H says her top spiritual pathway is intellectual. Then the next one is caregiver, and the next one is contemplative and naturalist. Contemplative and naturalist were a tie. So cool. And it's like, I love knowing those things, especially about people that I know and love, because it just helps me to appreciate each person for who God made them to be. And it makes sense. Like when you hear For people that hear that mine are intellectual first, then contemplative, and then enthusiast, it makes sense because although I might not be the loudest, most jubilant in any room, I'm a creative. I'm a singer. I didn't go very far with playing the organ or the drums, but there was a point where I played both. So expression through music and sound, it is a part of who God made me. And so, it makes sense when a person will hear like, oh, that makes sense. From knowing her, that makes sense. But a lot of people who maybe have known me in a certain era of life will more know me as a contemplative, will more know me as an intellectual, or as a person who connects with God in an intellectual way. You might not know me as an intellectual. I don't know that I even know myself as an intellectual, but basically it just means you engage things with your mind first. And once you can get a grasp of certain things, you're able to allow God to do what he's going to do and let him flesh it out of you in whatever way he desires to do that. So, anywho, that is the spiritual pathways. My encouragement is to know yours and to be super intentional this week to engage at least one of your top 3 every day. For some people, that might be like oh man, I really would have to put forth a concerted effort to do that. For others, it might actually be liberating because maybe you are holding yourself to needing to do 4 or 5 things daily, and it's actually taking away the joy of you actually spending time with God in the way that you best connect with him. Yes, we should read the word daily, whether we're intellectuals or not. But you might not feel as as you might not feel as much false guilt when you read your chapter or you read your passage and you need to go contemplate on it, and you don't go through the 5 chapters that maybe somebody else is reading. Somebody else is just speeding through those 5 chapters. They might go back and check the notes later, and then they are going to listen to their worship music and go about their day. Like we aren't holding each other to standards that we made up for ourselves and for others, right? Mrs. H said, "Thank you for encouraging me to find out what they are." Oh wow! See, y'all, I've been talking about this spiritual pathways thing for a long time. Thank you for reminding me of that. I completely forgot about that. I completely forgot. I know I've mentioned spiritual pathways a lot, but when I first discovered the pathways test, I was at a retreat. Where I was in a spiritual formation class at CIU, and one of the requirements was to attend the university retreat. And because of me and my introverted self, I was like, oh God, I got so much work to do. I don't want to go on a retreat. At the beginning of the school year, I don't know these people. I don't want to go on no. And then the retreat was like at a campground. I was like, oh, come on, man. Do I have to? But it was a requirement. The option was I would have still had to attend a retreat, but I would have had to find the retreat, and I would have had to write a paper about the retreat and all of this documentation. And it was just like, we're going to go on the retreat. So the retreat ended up being in Charleston at this like kind of beachfront campground. And although, sleeping in the, cabin and all of the things, didn't enjoy that part that much, but there was so many other things going on, and I just enjoyed it so much. And the very first like gathering that we had, they did the spiritual pathways, and I have literally never been the same since I took that. It really just gave language to how, for me, like, you don't have to be just like me, and I can still see like you are just bomb. You're amazing. But it also helped me to see, and I mentioned this and didn't finish telling the story earlier, but one of my mentors at CIU pointed out for me, she helped me to know that that was a part of my gifting. That was a part of my grace, the grace that God has placed on my life to be a ministry to people. That like, I can allow you to be yourself. You don't have to be me. The flip side of that was, from walking through like not fitting in, feeling rejected, and also knowing like, I know I have something good, to give, but it just doesn't really seem to fit anywhere. The flip side of that is that God very much used that pain and that like just trying to figure out my place to help me to grow closer to him and help me to like be okay with the fact that like I'm not like everybody. So while I could appreciate everyone else's differences, I needed to learn to appreciate my own difference in the way that I was always okay with like I just never wanted to be anyone else, even though like it was very hard sometimes to like figure out like where does what I have to give belong in the grand scheme of wherever I was and whatever I was doing. But I never wanted to be anyone else. And I'm very thankful for that because in that, instead of trying to shape shift into what other people wanted me to be, it just made me run after God even harder because it's just like, okay, Lord, if I'm gonna do this, if I'm gonna live this life for you, then you're gonna have to walk with me because I don't know too many people who quite get me when it comes to how I engage with you or this, that, and the third. Of course, I've met many other amazing people over the years and over time, especially in the recent years, thanks to social media and in the World Wide Web. I know that there are a lot of weird fish out there. That term, you guys know, comes from a song, but basically, there's a lot of just different people out there. Everyone does not fit a particular cookie cutter mode, but at the same time, I'm just thankful that I can appreciate like, you know, I could, go from a church that's playing the most popular shouting music with the bump that goes along with it to, a church that is high in liturgy and literally feel the presence of God and walk away, encouraged and uplifted. I am so thankful for that. I'm so thankful for that because I just feel that it helps me to not be limited to like my own style and flavor of things to the point where I can connect with whoever, God will bring across my path. So I'm thankful for that. No judgment necessarily for anyone else who's like, don't bring me no Baptist hymnals. I need some John P. Key in the Love Fellowship. I'm not judging y'all. Have at it. Have what you like. I can enjoy some John P. Key with you. But at the same time, I can also go listen to Michael W. Smith and hear from God, and I'll be good. So I'm thankful for that. Prayerfully, I was able to share a little bit of that gift with you here tonight by going over spiritual pathways. As soon as I log out, I'll pop the link into the description here. So go take the test and then come back and share in the comments what are your most dominant spiritual pathways. And then maybe we can come back and talk about times where you feel like, okay, that's why a particular experience so resonated with me because this is the way I most naturally connect with God. Like for me, with the retreat where I first took the spiritual pathways test, it very much connected with me. So this is more intellectual. I have an understanding. I have a language for something that I was already experiencing, and that changed my life. And so, and because of that, to this day, almost 10 years later, I'm still singing the praises of a pathways. For anyone, this can be for people who are newcomers to Christ, and you're new to the family of God, or for people who worshiped and served God from childhood and are now in their older years. It's okay to be reminded that God made you unique. It's okay to be reminded that like you need to take time out for yourself to engage the ways that you best connect with God. So I look forward to hearing from y'all after you take the test. Pop it down in the chat, and then I'll look out for those so I can make sure I can respond. I can't wait to hear what some of y'all's are. I'm sure I'll be surprised by some, and then others I'll probably be like, that makes perfect sense. That is exactly you. I get that. So I look forward to that. I pray that you all have an amazing week. Make sure, again, if you haven't yet, you go and subscribe to the Creative Scholar YouTube page. I will also put the link for that in the description here. The podcast, when it comes back for season 2, will be posted there. And then as soon as we get this, I'm able to stream live from the Creative Scholar YouTube page. I will be streaming some of the book club episodes, or book club meetings rather, over on that YouTube page. Now, for those who are actual members of the group that are able to be in the Zoom, if ever I record the Zoom and I stream it to the YouTube page, I will just share that link with people who want to be a part of the book club. I won't stream the Zoom live unless I tell you ahead of time and we're doing something special and people know that, okay, this is live on YouTube. And then, you can decide, to look how you want to look if you're going to turn the camera on. But all of that to say, just go ahead and subscribe to the Creative Scholar page, because a lot of the content that is a part of the Creative Scholar brand will be on that page. So the podcast and the book club, and then other, chats like this, I will stream on both pages, because this is relevant to the type of topic I would cover on A Dose of Danetta. But it's very much a Creative Scholar topic as well, helping us to understand the theology and the psychology of how we walk and live with each other and with God. All right, I'm going to sign off now. Thank you so much for your comments. Often those hymns pop in my head for sure. The older I get, the more I live and experience different things, the more those hymns come to mind. And I am very thankful for that today. All right, thanks again for watching. Have an amazing Sunday evening. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.